There is a question that lives quietly in the hearts of many who have loved someone deeply, only to find themselves depleted, confused, and questioning their own reality. The question is not often asked aloud, because it feels too vulnerable, too raw, but it is there. It is the question of what happens when the person who gave everything, who felt everything, who absorbed everything, finally walks away, and more specifically, what happens in the invisible realm, in the spiritual dimension, to the one who was left, or rather to the one who did the leaving. We are told often that the empath loses. We are told that the narcissist moves on without a backward glance, finding new sources of energy, new mirrors for their reflection. But the spiritual truth, the deeper truth that unfolds beneath the surface of observable behavior, is far more complex, far more profound, and ultimately, far more just. To understand what happens spiritually when a narcissist loses an empath, we must first understand what the connection between them truly represents. It is not merely a dysfunctional relationship, though it certainly appears that way on the surface. It is a dynamic, an unconscious contract, a meeting of two deep and often unhealed wounds. The narcissist, you see, is not a person who loves themselves too much. That is the great misconception. The narcissist is a person who fled from themselves long ago, who built a fortress of grandiosity around a core of profound, suffocating shame. They did not learn to connect, they learned to perform. They did not learn to feel their own emotions. They learned to extract a sense of worth from the reflection they saw in the eyes of others. They are, in a very real sense, spiritually empty, not evil, not beyond redemption, but empty. A hollow shell that requires a constant influx of external validation to feel even momentarily real. And the empath? The empath is often the opposite side of the same coin. Where the narcissist fled from feeling, the empath was perhaps taught, from a very young age, that their own feelings were secondary, that their worth lay in what they could provide for others, in their ability to sense and soothe the emotional states of those around them. They became experts in the emotional landscapes of others, often at the expense of their own needs, their own boundaries, their own sense of self, became fuzzy, negotiable, easily surrendered in the service of keeping the peace, earning love, or preventing abandonment. They carry a deep, often unconscious belief that love is something to be earned through sacrifice. And so, these two wounded souls find each other. It is not a coincidence. It is a resonance of unhealed places. The narcissist looks at the empath and sees a bottomless well of attention, admiration, and emotional supply. The empath looks at the narcissist and sees a project, a person to heal, a soul to save. They see the wounded child behind the mask, and they believe, with all their heart, that their love will be enough to reach that child. This is the trap. This is the unconscious contract. One person needs to be mirrored, and the other is an expert mirror. One person needs to feel powerful, and the other has been trained to make others feel powerful. One person cannot tolerate their own emptiness, and the other is terrified of their own fullness, their own needs, their own separate self. So what happens over time? The empath gives, and gives, and gives. They give their time, their energy, their compassion, their forgiveness. They explain away the harsh words. They make excuses for the broken promises. They shrink themselves to make the narcissist feel bigger. They silence their own intuition, the quiet voice that whispers, something is wrong, because to listen to that voice would mean facing an unbearable truth, that the love they are pouring out is not being received, but taken. It is not filling a heart, but a void. And voids, by their very nature, cannot be filled. They can only be managed momentarily with the next infusion of attention. And then something happens. The well begins to run dry. The empath, depleted to a point they may not even consciously recognize, begins to have moments of clarity. They might be triggered by a final, unforgivable act, or they might simply wake up one morning and realize they have nothing left. The engine of their giving has finally stalled. The tank is empty, and in that emptiness, there is a terrifying silence. For the first time, they are not focused on the narcissist's mood, the narcissist's needs, the narcissist's next reaction. They are staring into their own emptiness, and this, paradoxically, is the beginning of their salvation. When the empath finally leaves, or when they are discarded because they have no more supply to offer, the spiritual shift begins. For the empath, it is a long, painful, but ultimately liberating journey inward. They must now face the very thing they spent the entire relationship avoiding, themselves. They must sit with the discomfort of their own feelings they were so expert at suppressing in order to care for another. They must grieve not only the loss of the relationship, but the loss of the dream, the loss of all the love they poured into a vessel that could not hold it. They must feel the anger they never allowed themselves to feel. They must feel the shame of having abandoned themselves. This is not a quick process. It is a spiritual surgery, a slow and tender excavation of the self from beneath the rubble of the relationship. But for the narcissist, what happens spiritually when that source of supply is severed? This is where our understanding must become very subtle, very compassionate, and very real. On the surface, the narcissist will likely do what they have always done. They will find a new source. They will idealize a new person, a new partner, a new friend, a new job, a new project. They will fill the immediate void with fresh attention. To the outside world, and perhaps even to themselves, they will appear to have moved on without a scratch. They will tell themselves and anyone who will listen that the empath was the problem, that they were too sensitive, too needy, too unstable. This is the defense mechanism of projection, a way of ejecting the unbearable feelings of shame and emptiness and placing them onto the person who left. But spiritually, in the quiet, unguarded moments that even the most defended narcissist cannot entirely avoid, something else is happening. The loss of a long-term empath is not like losing any other source of supply. This was a person who truly saw them, or at least who tried to. This was a person who offered unconditional, positive regard, who mirrored back a version of them that was lovable, special, and worthy. When that mirror is removed, it is not just the loss of attention, it is the loss of a reflection. And without that reflection, the narcissist is left for fleeting, terrifying moments, with nothing but the unvarnished truth of their own inner state. Imagine, if you will, a room that has been brightly lit for years. The light covers every corner, illuminates every object, creates the illusion of warmth and substance. That light is the empath's attention. The narcissist lives in this room, believing the light is their own, believing the warmth is generated from within. Then one day the light is switched off. Suddenly the room is plunged into darkness, and in that darkness the narcissist does not immediately see a cozy furnished room. They see, if they dare to look, the cold, empty space that was always there. They feel the chill of the void that the light was keeping at bay. This is the spiritual consequence. It is not a punishment inflicted from the outside. It is a natural, inevitable consequence of the removal of the external regulator. The narcissist has spent a lifetime building a personality, a false self, a mask, to protect themselves from the overwhelming pain of their own perceived unworthiness. The empath's devotion was the final, most convincing piece of that mask. It was the ultimate proof that they were, in fact, the person they pretended to be. If this wonderful, caring person loves me, the unconscious logic goes, then I must be lovable, I must be real. When the empath leaves, that proof evaporates. The foundation of the false self begins to crack, and what seeps through those cracks is the very thing the narcissist has been running from their entire life, the raw, unmediated experience of their own shame. This is not a conscious process. The narcissist will not sit in a chair and say, Ah, I am now confronting my core shame. They will feel it as anxiety, as rage, as a profound sense of being wronged. They will feel a desperate, gnawing emptiness that no new person can quite fill in the same way. They will engage in what is called narcissistic injury, a reaction of intense fury or cold contempt designed to annihilate the source of the pain. They may try to hoover the empath back, to suck them into the dynamic again, not out of love, but out of a desperate need to turn the light back on. They may launch a campaign of smear, trying to destroy the empath's reputation, to control the narrative, to ensure that the outside world continues to reflect the version of themselves they need to see. But all of these are external behaviors, frantic attempts to fix an internal crisis. The spiritual truth is that the loss of the empath confronts the narcissist with a choice they are profoundly unequipped to make. The choice is to finally turn inward, to face the darkness they have been fleeing, to begin the long, painful journey of feeling their own feelings. This is the path of genuine spiritual transformation. But it is a path that requires a humility, a vulnerability, and a capacity for self-reflection that the narcissist's entire psychological structure was built to avoid. Most will not take it. Most will find another light source, another person to prop up their fragile sense of self. They will repeat the cycle perhaps for the rest of their lives, and each time a source is lost, the wound is reopened, the emptiness is felt again, and the defense mechanisms must work even harder. So what happens spiritually? The narcissist is handed, on a silver platter, the very opportunity they have been avoiding their whole life, the opportunity to meet themselves. They are given a chance, through the pain of loss, to finally ask the question they have never dared to ask. Who am I when no one is looking? But because they cannot bear the answer, they will almost certainly refuse the gift. They will contract, they will harden, they will build the walls of their fortress even higher. The loss, instead of leading to growth, leads to a deeper entrenchment in the false self. The spirit, instead of expanding, shrinks further into its protective shell. The emptiness, instead of being filled from within, is perpetually patched over with the cheap plaster of external validation. It is a tragedy. Not a tragedy of villainy, but a tragedy of unhealed pain. And what of the empath in all of this? While the narcissist is either frantically seeking a new reflection or hardening into their defenses, the empath is on a different journey. They are in the darkness too, but they are learning to create their own light. They are learning, perhaps for the first time, to sit with their own feelings, to hear their own inner voice, to attend to the needs of the self they so long abandoned. This is not a comfortable process. It is a grieving process. They grieve the love they gave. They grieve the person they thought they were with. They grieve the version of themselves that believed sacrifice was the only path to connection. And slowly, very slowly, something begins to shift. They begin to notice that the silence is not as terrifying as they thought. They begin to find moments of peace in their own company. They begin to set boundaries, small at first and then larger, and feel the strange, exhilarating sensation of being safe within their own skin. They begin to realize that the love they poured out so endlessly was not lost. It was a reflection of their own capacity, their own depth, their own beautiful, wounded, resilient heart. That capacity did not belong to the narcissist. It was always theirs. And now, for the first time, they can begin to direct it inward. This is the great spiritual paradox. The one who was seemingly depleted becomes full. The one who was seemingly left behind finds themselves. The one who was told they were too much or not enough begins to discover the exquisite truth of their own sufficiency. They were never empty. They were just pouring themselves into a cup with no bottom. When they stopped pouring, they discovered they were the source. So, what happens spiritually when a narcissist loses an empath? Two very different things happen. in two very different spiritual realities. In the reality of the narcissist, the external light goes out, revealing a void they cannot face, leading to a frantic search for a new lamp or a deeper retreat into the fortress of the false self. It is a missed appointment with their own soul. It is a continuation of the flight from self. In the reality of the empath, the external demand ceases, and they are finally able to turn their gaze inward. They sit in the dark, and in that darkness, they begin to see faint glimmers of their own inner light. They begin to tend the flame. They begin to realize they were never the moon, reflecting another's sun. They were always the sun themselves, and they had simply forgotten how to shine on their own. And this perhaps is the most profound truth of all. The loss, as devastating as it is, can become the empath's greatest teacher. It teaches them the cost of self-abandonment. It teaches them the difference between love as a transaction and love as a true meeting of two whole beings. It teaches them that real connection is not about two people filling each other's voids, but about two people, each comfortable in their own skin, choosing to share their light. The narcissist, in their desperate flight from self, remains in the realm of transaction. The empath, in their painful journey home, enters the realm of transformation. And so, if you are listening to this and you recognize yourself in the empath, know this: your journey now is not about what happened to you. It is about who you are becoming. The pain you feel is not a sign of your failure, but a symptom of your deep capacity to love. And that capacity, once reserved for another, must now be turned toward the one person who has been waiting for it all along: you. The narcissist's spiritual path is not yours to worry about. Their emptiness, their rage, their frantic search for supply, it is their own journey, their own lesson, their own missed opportunity or eventual awakening. Your path is to heal the wound that made you available to such a dynamic. Your path is to reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away. Your path is to learn that your worth was never in what you could provide, but in the simple, unassailable fact of your existence. The world may tell you that you lost. It may look at the narcissist's apparent easy transition to a new relationship and tell you that you were the one who was used and discarded. But the spiritual truth is far more nuanced, far more just. You have not lost. You have been released. Released from a contract that was draining your life force. Released from a mirroring role that kept you small. Released to finally meet the person you were always meant to care for. The beautiful, wounded, resilient soul that is you. And in that meeting, in that slow, tender, lifelong process of self-rediscovery, you will find a love that no one can ever take away. A love that is not conditional on your performance. A love that is the very ground of your being. And the narcissist? They will continue their search for someone to fill the void. They will move from person to person, from conquest to conquest, from drama to drama. And with each failed connection, with each discarded empath, the lesson will be offered again. The opportunity to turn inward will be presented again. And perhaps, after enough pain, after enough emptiness, after enough failed external fixes, a crack will finally appear in the fortress that is wide enough for a sliver of self-awareness to enter. Perhaps then, the long, hard journey home can begin for them too. That is their story, not yours. Your story is the one you are writing now, with every boundary you set, with every feeling you allow yourself to feel, with every moment you choose to honor your own needs. Your story is the story of coming home to yourself, and that in the end is the only spiritual victory that truly matters.